Why, hello, it is I, Chris Brogan, and this is the brief for Friday, the 10th of November, 2017. First and foremost, Semper Fi, Marines. Today is the birthday of the United States Marine Corps. So happy for all that you do, and thanks for your service, Marines. This is also Veterans Day, at least in the United States, in which we celebrate all the women and men who have served in our armed forces. You could be anti-war, you could be anti-certain specific parts of the situation, but remember that these women and men have put themselves in front of all kinds of danger to protect others and to stand up for things that go beyond their own view of personal safety. This news story that I put out, the brief, is all built around the concept of sharing ideas and thoughts and storylines that I find interesting from stories that I read in ways that they may or may not apply to your business or your life. So in putting this together, what my goal is to share with you some ideas that might possibly get you further along in some form or fashion in your business and life. So that's kind of why we get there. These are things that I've read or found from other places across the internet. I share them all with you at chrisbrogan.com/CBM. This makes it easy for you to follow along. You don't have to take my advice on any of this stuff. You can click through and read the stories for yourself without my blathery commentary. But if you like my blathery commentary, then hey, it's like me reading some interesting news stories without you having to find them on your own and give you ideas. You want to make a show like this for yourself, you could go to Ecamm Live. It's the best way to do Facebook Live for Mac. These are friends of mine, and I also sometimes get the chance to work with them. Before I begin, I had a really interesting conversation with a lady on Twitter about the nature of Twitter and fandom, and I wanted to shout out to Carrie, who we had quite a great conversation. Now, I have to tell you this because it was really interesting to me, because the conversation was better than a lot of times where I've had conversations with people who identify mostly as fans. What we talked about was, I said I kind of detest the word fan. I think that fan makes people seem like they're on a lower level. I think that fan means that there's an artist and there's a fan, and that you have to I would rather have peers and allies than fans. And it was a good conversation. It was a thoughtful conversation. So shout out to you, Carrie, because it was really good to have that conversation and not just the typical fighting that goes on when people have a disagreement of some kind on the tweeters. Hello, Ferg Devens, my brother, sir. Hail to those heroes who have given so much for our freedom, at least lest we forget. No question at all. Most certainly. Speaking about things like this and getting on with the news, I wanted to start with something that addresses these repeat stories of gun violence and all this kind of yuck stuff going on in the world. It'll be brief, but this is kind of bizarre. A Florida school has decided to turn kids' backpacks into bulletproof shields. That kind of freaks me out. I'm not sure I know the best possible way to deal with this gun violence, but I don't like there's going to be guns, we might as well give the kids bulletproof clothing. That one kind of freaks me out. Who knows? I don't know your take on it. My take is that, I don't know that that's necessarily where the problem lies. That's like getting a whole bunch of snake bite kits instead of an exterminator. But there's other ways to look at this. This question is, could software stop school shootings? This is from someone who developed a bunch of software that does all kinds of analytics based on something that happened strangely. This app was called something Pick My Kid, which was a startup that allows you to understand and see who's out front and understand where the kids are and track a lot of movement and stuff like that in schools with cameras. It was basically built for the whole part of the school day where teachers are dropping off kids to the cars and all that sort of a thing. When this Indian gentleman said that someone dropped a white girl in his car, meaning obviously the teacher wasn't paying enough attention, etc. So their software might possibly have some tools in it that could also help with this gun violence. I bring it up because I think it's interesting, and I think it's another thing to pay attention to. It also falls to this trend that I'm tracking of software and data being provided to where the need is, as opposed to after the fact. Data used to be this thing that we all sat around tables and looked at very long after any kind of a circumstance, but there's just so many situations where the information that could be available is getting surfaced faster and in a way that can help us out. Another example of this is that Google Maps is reporting that they're going to start showing wait times for restaurants on the map. So not only do you just look at the map to say, how do I find this restaurant like Chloe in Boston, but then you say, oh, and there's a 15-minute wait. I don't know if I want to wait 15 minutes, right? So it's kind of interesting that this has become a trend. Speaking of things, local maps and all that, Facebook has relaunched their events as sort of a Foursquare looking thing called Local. And so it's interesting because once again, they're going to try to make this work. This is a sort of calendar sort of app that is happenings around town, so to speak. So it is sort of a iOS app. I don't know if it's on the Android store yet. I haven't taken a look yet. And the idea is that it's going to help you find where things are local. Again, this points to the idea and the trend of data being available when we need it, not long after the fact. It is so important to start thinking about that. How can we support this? What on your website does or doesn't satisfy that? How are you or aren't you reacting to that information? Because it's important that people understand kind of up to the minute information about your business. Sometimes, my business doesn't have an office per se. You have to make an appointment to hang out with me. You don't need to know my hours. This one's just kind of in the fun department. KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, someone just found out something that has been hiding in plain sight for a long time on Twitter. KFC tracked down this person and then sent him some really cool gifts. But here's what was found out. The people at Twitter, evidently, were following 11 people. Those 11 people were 5 Spice Girls and 6 different guys named Herb. So 11 herbs and spices. Oh my gosh. So hiding in plain sight was a pun about KFC's famous 11 herbs and spices. And someone figured this out finally after years of that being the truth, and I guess was given some kind of a commensurately lovely gift. I liked this article just because it was sort of fun. Entrepreneur has a whole bunch of information on 25 business ideas worth millions that I don't have time to build. And I looked through the list, and some of them were kind of obvious, some of them weren't. But, these are full-on companies someone could launch. And, I was looking through, I looked at Chatbot Builder for frequently asked questions. Online course industry is a lot rougher than it used to be. I don't know if I would agree with him on that. But these are a whole bunch of different revenue-generating sources. I don't think becoming an internet influencer is a good plan. Affiliate marketing is great, event planning. There's all kinds of things hidden in here. Now, this is interesting to me for 2 reasons. I used to read, I don't know about you, but I used to read a long time ago when such a thing existed. I read those lists of different jobs you could have and all that sort of thing and thought, maybe I could do that, or maybe I could do that, or money-making opportunities in magazines. This is kind of an updated version of that. And I found that sort of interesting. I'd like to talk a lot about artificial intelligence, chatbots, that sort of a thing. This was an interesting one, probably a little more apropos for Halloween, but we can talk about it now. Legit horrifying horror stories written by artificial intelligence. So here's one at the very beginning. I stood there staring down the hill, and I saw the man in the black cloak standing there holding a knife. He stood in silence, his head motionless, but staring at me. I'm sorry. I found you. I want you to enjoy this curse. I love you. I'm so sorry. That was written by an artificial intelligence, not written by a human. So this is a robot called Shelley, probably after Mary Shelley, the creator of Frankenstein. And so there's all these other kinds of things. So here's another AI story, piece from this person. It was a grisly body from this robot. It was a grisly body that had been in continuously decaying flesh and bones. Many of them were barely bits of glass pinching the ground below. The man was the snake. He stared at me, the mouth distorted into some sad smile. So let's see. I remember his face in a look of horror, and it was in agony and malice. I was trapped in this hospital's bed. Again, what makes that interesting is that robots wrote that story. We're always saying that, robots can't take my job because my job's a creative job. There's a robot that can write horror stories if you want. I had an interesting trend insight when looking at this report. This is a story about a little nurse robot called Tug. This is a robot. And Tug wanders around delivering food and other stuff, and it can call elevators, and it can deliver stuff between floors. And this is in existence now. Tug exists. It's not very widely distributed, but there are all kinds of things, including it can carry organs around and that sort of a thing. Kind of nuts that this exists. But in thinking about this, here's the trend I wanted to point out. I have a lot of friends who are disabled in some way or another. Some of them are in wheelchairs and whatnot, and they have lots and lots and lots of trouble with accessibility. They've forever complained that handicapped accessibility just isn't really a thing and people don't do a lot for it. Strangely enough, I'm looking out this window and there's a restaurant right here, and the handicap spot is in the back that goes up to a blank door that no one would ever possibly come to. And I don't know how anyone would ever choose to go in that entranceway or whatever. This is the kind of the state of affairs for people on wheels. However, here's the trend concept. I have this feeling that because we're going to do things to accommodate these very expensive robots, we will naturally make the world a little more traversable for people with disabilities, not because we care enough about those people with disabilities, which of course is what we all should, but because we want our robots to get around a little easier. That's weird to think about, but I think there's something to it because I think that up until now, we just haven't seen that anyone's really caring about that process. This is an interesting story because our most recent Pope, for those of you who like and support the Pope, has been very much more progressive than other people. He's a big fan of the selfie and all that, but not while he's preaching. Pope scolds bishops for lifting up phones and not their hearts during Mass. Yes, Pope Francis has said, you know what? I get it. I know you want to take pictures. Hey, I was here at this, preaching while I'm here with the Pope, but it is a dopey thing for you to be doing video recordings and selfies with me instead of praying, because that's what we're supposed to be all here doing, is praying, you doofuses. That's the Pope. I love when the Pope goes off on people, and especially, this guy loves selfies and that sort of thing. He just says, maybe don't do it in church. It's a weird world where the Pope has to tell you when and when not to do selfies. Do you think your clothes can remember things? I think my clothes can store smells from places, and, I think, oh, how could that still be there? But this is different. Clothes made from a data storing fabric will remember your passcodes. This comes at a very interesting time because there was a news story just today talking about smartphones, because the Texas shooter's smartphone was locked, and there was a whole bunch of conversation going around about, can they use the Texas smartphone shooter's dead finger to unlock his own phone? What's the legality around corpse manipulation to get data out of a phone? Right? Like, we have never had to think about this before, but now that phones have, biometric tools to lock them up and all that, is it just, sane, okay, legal, or whatever to allow a corpse to unlock a phone? And so at the same time, here's this report from PSFK saying that you can have fabric that can remember your data. Well, that's good, because then you don't need a corpse and you probably don't have to subpoena a glove. But it is a little interesting to think of fabric that will maintain data. Now, what also makes this interesting is that we're going into this world of ambient computing. Things like Alexa, things like Google Home, all these platforms where you can just sort of say stuff into the air. Well, having fingertips that can create data, or having fabric that stores stuff instead of the old-fashioned laptop with a hard drive on it, we are moving into a spot where our computing is getting more and more and more physically dispersed and isn't just natural to a keyboard and a laptop. I am not a big proponent of things like virtual reality just yet. I guess I like AR a little more than I like VR. And yet, I think we're getting there. I think we're getting to the spot where being able to throw kind of a virtual keyboard into the air is going to make a lot more sense, or some other kind of controls. We're not necessarily going to have to type in this future, where I can already say to Alexa, hey, Alexa, order me some more batteries. This is getting closer and closer. Does being vegan alone mean you're being super healthy? Ask this fat guy that question. Not so much, but there's a new documentary out. It's basically kind of a super size me, showing the impact of a junk food diet called But It's Vegan. So this is a fun documentary to throw around to your friends and talk all about the health benefits of veganism. I have no care about the health benefits. I'm more or less into it for sort of saving the planet. And I don't consider myself vegan. I eat mostly plant-based. But what's kind of fun about this little documentary is it shows all the various things that maybe happen to be vegan, but maybe aren't super healthy. Case in point, Oreo cookies, vegan. All right, this one went a little longer than normal. Sorry about that. The very last piece of every single one of these is usually something nerdy. This is no exception. You know me and I love cosplay. This is some cosplay from BlizzCon. BlizzCon is people who make World of Warcraft, but also Overwatch. And so there's all kinds of really fun pictures that you can open up. So let's see if I can get this to open in front of us all. It thinks it's opening. It thinks it is. There we go. So here's some different people in various cosplay from various Blizzard properties. What I like about cosplay is it's an interesting concept, and profession is not the right word, but an interesting pursuit where people decide that they want to take the time to make these very ornate costumes to represent characters that they care a great deal about. That one I know, that's made from Overwatch. I don't play Warcraft, so I don't know any of these. The detail that they put into them, the work they put into them, all the time that goes into this, and all the heartfelt feelings that they put into this cosplay becomes very interesting, and it becomes exciting because all these people are not just saying, hey, I like this property, but I want to be part of it. I want to contribute to it. Something I bet you didn't know is that things like video games these days are spending time in their character design process of thinking through, how will someone cosplay this as they're designing the video game properties. That's new. That's interesting because they're saying we want people to be able to contribute and be part of this. And like I said at the very beginning of this, when I was talking about Carrie and fans and all that, one of the big changes in fandom these days is that user-generated content, stuff made by the fans themselves, is taking on a life of its own, causing all kinds of new legal challenges to intellectual property rights and all that, but also showing that there's lots of ways to build excitement into the storyline. That's it for me. These are all the stories. As always, if you like what's going on here, you can go to chrisbrogan.com/CBM. You don't have to listen to my narrative to see all those links. You can click through at any single one of these and read the articles for yourself. chrisbrogan.com/CBM is where you do that. If you want to make a show like this for yourself, go to Ecamm Live. It's the easiest way to do Facebook Live on a Mac. So fun, so easy. Hey, thanks so much for your time. If ever you want to get in touch with me directly, it's just chris@chrisbrogan.com. Always happy. So glad to be part of this today. Semper Fi, Marines, and happy Veterans Day.